My name's Joy Butler, and I'm currently the chair of the costume committee at Bay City Players. I have been a professional costume designer. I've been a college teacher. I've been a teacher of everything from 2nd to 12th grade, and then college to PhD students. I've worked in regional theater, and I've kind of traveled around the country doing theater and arts administration. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about costuming and why we do costuming. When I talk with most of my students, I've always said that we want to create a universe in which the action of the play can make sense. And the way we do that is we have constant communication with the production staff, the production team, which is the director and the stage manager, and the designers, lighting, set, props, costumes, and then constant communication with actors. That's really the most important thing that we do in the theater, is communicate with each other so that we can then create a universe that the audience can enter and hopefully enjoy. One of the ways that we do this is with sketches. This particular sketch was done for Lend Me a Tenor here at Bay City Players last year. And it was a quick sketch with the fabrics being shown here on the side. And we kind of worked on that while we put this together to make sure that it was what we had talked about in the production team. And then this was a way to communicate to the actor what they're going to be wearing, or in this case the actors, because we had to make duplicate costumes. We can also do full-colored renderings that help us to communicate. One of the things that costuming can do is it can delineate character. And in this particular show, this was How the Other Half Loves. And we had a young kind of hippie-ish couple that was trying to become grown-ups. And we had an older, more staid couple that had to be presented on stage at the same time in their apartments. So the stage was divided in half in order to make the action work. And the costumes were done to emphasize a little bit of middle age and a little bit of a young couple just starting out. So they went along with the set and the lighting so that we could show you two apartments and two sets of actions at once. Sometimes costumes can be used to delineate character through color. I did a show at Crawfordsville, Indiana one time, Wabash College, called The Miser. And in The Miser, we had the lead character who was all in green, and his family would then be dressed in shades of green. His servants were dressed in kind of greeny brown colors. And the whole thing was that the miser had plenty of money, but he didn't want to spend it on himself or anybody else. So the costumes and the set were kind of grungy. They reflected a time period, however, and we're fairly close to the time period as far as the outline of the costumes was concerned. And this is the young couple. So everything in this show was designed to help the audience figure out who belonged to whom in the show. Sometimes we do color as a scheme, working with, a very simple color pattern. This was done for My Fair Lady at Western Illinois University. It was the Ascot race, and everything had to be black and white. The men were in pearl gray tuxes that were rented, but all of these costumes were made from this rendering. Sometimes we are trying to do costumes and work with authentic period looks. This was a show called Something's Afoot, and it was a musical. These were the two lead actresses in their first iteration when they came on stage, and these were actually built off of 1930s period patterns that we used. Everything in the show was made to look as close as possible to the 1930s in order to make the whole naivete and silliness of the show make sense. This is a show where the set actually kills all of the actors. And then one of my favorite things to do is Shakespeare. Shakespeare can be done many, many ways. Obviously, when Shakespeare was around writing, the costuming was quite different than it is now. First of all, there were no actresses. All the men took the parts. And they dressed as the women and the men. They got their costumes from daily life, and many times their patrons would give them cast-off, noble-type costumes, and that's what they would wear when they wanted to be fancy. There was no real sense of historical accuracy with costuming until about the 19th century, and realism started taking over, and we tried to begin to look more and more like what we picture people looked in a certain time period. So with Shakespeare, we can do a lot of different things. When the director comes up with a concept that's just out there and works with a production team, I've seen Julius Caesar done in a sandbagged theater during the Vietnam era in Vietnam military clothes. I worked on Comedy of Errors one time as an original rock opera, and that was crazy. I also worked on Midsummer Night's Dream in New Hampshire, and we did it New Age. So Oberon, everything was done with bodysuits and added accessories to them to delineate character. This was Oberon. He was in a black bodysuit with this silvery drape over it, and he had sort of like snakes wrapped around his body, and that was made out of the insulation tubing that you put around a window. He had twigs, and we made a kind of a foresty crown for him. And the makeup, as you can see, was rather radical. Puck was a gymnast, a professional gymnast, and we took advantage of that by having her be in the bodysuit with just little drapes of things that matched Oberon. And she had the little snaky stuff on her gym shoes down there. And so that was that couple. Then there was Titania, and Titania was in a bodysuit with a dress over it. Her wig was made, we used a basic wig, and we used ribbon and chore boys and all kinds of things in her wig to make it look all crazy. So this was a totally different concept, and it would not have worked if we had just done that with the costumes. But the set, as you can see, especially in this one, the set went along with the New Age theme, and the lighting was very moody and New Agey. We used a lot of crystals and things in the show to pull in that whole New Age piece. And then the roustabouts all had standard jumpsuits with little apron things on them. And they had, this was a lantern that we made. This was the bush of thorns and the moon for the play within the play. They were all just kind of crazy. And it all worked together, and because Shakespeare, the genius of the Shakespearean language and the plotting, allows you to go into a very different take on the show, this actually worked because it all came together. The director's concept, the costuming, the lights, the set, the props, everything worked together so that the audience could believe that this was an enchanted forest with all these strange things happening. Now we go from communicating through rendering, sketches, talking, etc., to actually building the costumes. Here again, this was from the Miser. These were from Greece. When you're doing a show like Grease or many other shows, you do a lot of research. When I did this show, I used high school yearbooks from the 1950s. And I jokingly said I kind of remembered my aunt and her friends because she was a teenager in the 50s. And a lot of the people ended up looking like some of her friends. This was from Pippin. Pippin was another show that we did a very Romanesque but modern take on. We did a lot of costumes made out of macrame. We did the armor out of plastic needlepoint. And this particular overdress for Fastrada was actually taped together. It was a plastic Roscoe product that they had just brought out for using on sets. So we made a costume out of it. And then, shifting gears, again we talked about a universe that we're creating. This was done at Bay City Players. This was All My Sons. And as you can see, the lighting worked with the costumes. This was an evening scene. And we actually pulled the costumes out on stage and tried them with some of the lights to make sure that this particular scene would work as well as it did. These costumes were almost completely pulled from our stock. They are late 40s, early 50s costumes. In fact, one of them, this striped dress here, was my mom's that I had kept for some reason over the years. So this was a really pretty historically accurate show, and we were lucky that we had people that worked well with that style of costuming. Now, costume can also be street theater. Many people are going to Ren fairs, not this year, but typically this time of year would be a Ren fair. Now these are all street costumes from Bristol Renaissance Festival. This is the Noble Court. This person is a merchant. I actually made this costume for myself when I did I produced a Ren fair, and I also worked as a merchant at Bristol. This was representing some of the lower nobility, upper servant class type costumes. You can see that this person and this person are the same person, but playing different characters from different backgrounds. Not as fancy. He was a man's servant. So he had to be all in black, and he had to be not fancy. But when he was playing one of the noblemen, he became fancier. This is from the Dead Parade, which is a tradition at some of the Ren fairs and at Bristol. I have been tempted during this time of the COVID virus to organize a dead parade down the street, but nobody will let me do it. But they were all, the characters in the dead parade were actually all in black, and they would come out, and the thing was, during the play, during the Renaissance, there would actually be danse macabre, or dead parades, where you do not look death in the eye or he will come for you. So they would have this fantasy, and that's actually where Ring Around the Rosie came from too, was that particular play. So it can be pretty creepy. It can set a mood, which is also what costuming can do. And this time it was costume and movement that worked together. These are just some of the costumes from the fair. This happened to be at a wedding that had a costume theme. So you can do all kinds of street costumes. And cosplay has become a big deal right now. So these are some examples of strange cosplay costumes. This particular piece was all cardboard, and these are corks that the person painted, and he just did that for fun. Again, another take on knights. This is pretty strange because this was a project that people were doing. These are gloves that make up the antler. This is a stocking. This is a sleeping bag for the squirrel's tail, and gloves for the feet, and a beanie with ears stuck on it. Let me see. This one was just socks and golf balls and cushions that made this animal. This particular dress, although the line of it looks like 1776, it's all made with garment bags and magazines and cell phone batteries. It's all kind of found objects that have been put together. And then this young man down here, his mother made him a corrugated cardboard samurai outfit. This is what costuming can do. All of this range. It can be pulled out of your stock. It can be borrowed. It can be out of your actors' closets if you're doing a contemporary show. It is not limited except by your imagination, your skill, and working within the parameters of the show to make something come true that the audience can understand and appreciate. And one thing I would like to say about costuming is it's an instant communication. You have about 12 seconds when you first meet somebody to form your opinion of them. I think it's actually less than that on stage. The minute an actor walks out, you start having some visceral response to that character. You start relating to them. They're either a villain, or they're a good guy, or they're a heroine, or whatever it happens to be. We use stereotypes often in costuming. We don't rely on them, but sometimes you have to do that. If it's a villain, you'll see them in black frequently. Think of Darth Vader. If it's a bride, we put them in white, although white was not used for brides until the late 19th century. So color, response, stereotypes, the way that we look at what's around us, these are all used by costumers and costume designers to communicate with your audience. It brings us back to what we started with. You have to communicate with the director, the production team, the actors, so that you can have a cohesive, understandable universe in which the action of the play can make sense. That's just a brief rundown of what costumes can do. Stay tuned for more if you're interested. Thank you. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Too long?
I don't think so.
You could, how many minutes?
About 18, 19.
Oh, it should be about 10 or 15.
Well, that's okay. I think you...
Can you cut it at all? Or was it repetitive?
I don't think it was repetitive.
Did it sound